Hey everyone, Exo Man here, and I have a quick rant. I'm trying to make it brief anyway, about the restaurant industry, okay? And waiters, waitresses, the restaurants themselves, tipping, pizza delivery, things like that. I'll try to get through this briefly. Let me start with waitstaff. If you are a waiter or a waitress in a traditional American restaurant, you work for tips more than you work for wages. Everybody knows that. You all as patrons should know that these people work for very small wages and they work for tips. Now I'm going to get into that further in a minute, but that is currently the business model. So the bulk of their income comes from your graciousness as a patron. But you waiters and waitresses, now you really need to understand something quite simple. If you work as I said, in a traditional American restaurant, much is expected of you, okay? If you're not in a comedic sort of theme restaurant where it is expected of you to be smart aleck and put silly hats on people and write insulting things on them, you know, like there's a place in Myrtle Beach called, I think it's Dick's, where they insult you and they joke with you and they just razz you the whole time, and everybody at your table, and they make fun of you. That's a joke, and everybody's in on it, and everybody gets it, and you know, people behave accordingly because they don't feel like they're being disrespected because they went there for that. Okay, everybody gets that. If you don't work in one of those restaurants, don't be a smartass. Okay, be polite. It is expected of you. I'm sorry, that's just the way it works. Be polite to your customers. Your customers are entrusting you with their appetite, with their time, with their money, everything, their patience, etc. So treat them respectfully, okay? Don't be a smartass. Let me give you a couple of examples. Just recent examples. I was traveling and I was in Savannah, Georgia. We got a big low country boil and it included crawfish. The crawfish were very obviously cooked, frozen, whole body crawfish, which is a disgusting thing to do. If you know anything about lobster or crawfish, these are creatures that are cooked alive. You don't freeze them and then cook them. And there are numerous reasons for this, one of them being flavor and the other being health. So I sort of complained. I said, you know, because look, I'm paying this money for this low country boil. I'm expecting fresh seafood and I got frozen crawfish, and the waitress wasn't really hearing what I was saying. And I said, look, I'm from Louisiana and this is a regular meal down there and this is just not how you do it. And she said, well, you're not in Louisiana. So I cannot fathom why this woman decided to take issue with me like that when I was being pretty polite. I'm normally a very polite guy until you push my buttons. Needless to say, if you act like that, I'm going to leave. If I leave you anything, it's going to be 5% or less. And I normally am. My wife and I normally tip 20%. I sometimes have to argue her down from 25%. She wants to tip 25 because she's such a loving, sweet woman. If you do a halfway decent job, she wants to tip you 20, 25%. I have to explain to her that 25% is reserved for something stellar and extraordinary. And even 20, you know, if you do a halfway decent job, I'm not going to tip you 20%. If you do a great job, I'm going to tip you 20, and so on. If you do a crappy job, but you tried, I'm going to tip you maybe 10%. And that's the way it goes. And I've been in this industry, and my family has been in this industry. My wife was a waiter, my brother was a waiter, I was a waiter for a time. We were all cooks, etc. We worked laborious jobs and kitchen jobs and all those things growing up. So we know. So you might not be a cold-hearted person, but you might be ignorant about this. If you're a patron, these people work for tips. Remember that. If you want to change the world and you want to change the business model, more power to you. But meanwhile, these kids are trying to go to medical school. They're in college. They're whatever they're doing. A woman that is bringing you your grits probably has a baby at home that needs formula. For Christ's sake, understand this. Be at least a compassionate and halfway intelligent about this, and don't just be a hard ass and say, well, I don't like to tip. I don't think it should be that way. Well, that's the way it is in America. Okay, lobby your local businesses if you want to call restaurants, be proactive, say, I don't like the business model. If you change your restaurant to a no-tip zone, I'll come to your restaurant. I'll be more likely to patronize your restaurant as opposed to the guy down the street that doesn't pay his staff as much. You pay your staff more, and I'll get a bunch of people to reward you with more business. That's a proactive thing. But going into a restaurant where a kid is trying to work their way through college and saying, I've got an attitude about this and I'm not going to tip you, punk, because I've got an attitude, I've got a problem with the business model, that's at best very ignorant. It's very callous. So don't do that. I was talking about waiters and waitresses and their responsibilities. Yes, they have responsibilities too. We'll get back to that in a second. Pizza delivery. If you are, oh man, I could go off on people, but I'm going to try to remain calm. And this was something we had given thought to and heard about before we ever entered into this industry. My son was a delivery driver for a pizza restaurant for a while. Nicest kid in the world, okay? And he'll go to these houses far, far and wide. He'll drive out to the boonies and deliver some schmuck pizza and they stiff him. Again, you are at the very best profoundly ignorant about how things work. These kids don't work for $15 an hour. They work for like $2 or $3 an hour plus tips. So their primary income is tips. And if you're calling a business and saying, have a person deliver a pizza to me and you don't tip them, you're a lazy, no good scoundrel. Don't do that, okay? Get your lazy ass out of your house and drive yourself down there. Put the mileage and wear on your car. Spend the gas money. You go pick up the damn pizza if you don't believe you should tip, okay? Because that's the way it is. These are kids working for tips. Some of them are other unskilled people, you know, more or older people that just don't have good jobs. That's all they can get, and they're trying to pay their mortgages and they're working for tips. Don't have an attitude. Don't order a pizza for delivery if you can't afford to tip the driver. Just don't do it. My son has told me that sometimes we don't have this richer than poorer than mentality, but he said, you know, it's ironic that he said I pull up to a trailer and there's you know, a Mexican family there that barely speaks English, and they tip me $5 in quarters. And then I go to a house on the Sound, you know, with a waterfront view, 3 stories high, a palace, and they tip me 5 cents. This actually happens. So think these things through. Just give it some thought and educate yourself. Don't just be one of those people because you can. When you go, and again, waiters and waitresses and delivery people, much is expected of you. If I'm going to a restaurant and I put in an order and it's food that I want to receive hot, that is a normal expectation. That is a minimal expectation. And then I see you go to the kitchen, drop it off. 8 minutes later, I know it's not very busy. I know that food is probably ready and sitting on the counter, and then you come out and start bussing tables from having a little drink in the back or something, I don't know, and then you come take a drink order for a table of 10 and go make tea and things like that. I know my food's getting cold. I'm not going to tip you, okay? It's not mandatory, again, waiters and waitresses, that I tip you. It's not mandatory that I get your humor. It's not mandatory that I be patient with your lack of awareness and thoughtfulness. Nothing's mandatory, and that's for such a business model. That's the way it should be. So I hope maybe this will enlighten a few people. I hope it helps. More power to you people in the service industry. I have great regard for you. I was one of you. Many of my family members have been among your numbers, and we respect you, and we do tip you a lot. And when we appreciate you and realize you're working hard for us, or at least giving it your best. So those are a few things I wanted to mention. I hope this helps in some way. Thanks for watching, everyone.